Hello, everyone, and welcome to Financial Minds Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Jaime Agostino. On this podcast, we're joined by financial industry experts to talk about topics, trends, and themes that credit union professionals need to know about. Today, we are welcoming back a familiar face, Mike Bechtel, Vizo Financial's Information Security Engineer. Mike, thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely.
We're going to do something a little different this week. Mike's actually going to share with us a real security scenario. Then I'm going to ask him a few questions about that scenario. So Mike, go ahead. Tell me about this security scenario you have up your sleeve.
All right. So this was an incident that had occurred at one of our member credit unions, and not to fear, all the specific details as to the who fors and why nots are all going to be removed. So no one will have to suffer the indignity. This surrounds something called BEC, or business email compromise. So pick a day, any day of the week. It's Tuesday. It's the middle of the day. Nothing's really going on. A staff member at your office receives an email. The email is posed as though it's coming from the CEO of the credit union. Hey, we had a bit of an issue last night, a little bit of detail as to what the issue was, so that there's some context to chew on. And then as you go through the email then says, hey, in order to resolve this issue, we're going to need to wire money from here to there. And here is all the forwarding rules, and here's the ABA number and account number and the name, everything you're going to need to fill out a wire. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And then that's the end of it. The staff member who receives this email, for unknown reasons, we'll say, simply gets the message and like, well, hey, I want to be the hero. I want to be the person that helps. Let's go off and get this taken care of. They happen to have access to the wire system, so they don't need to engage anyone else in order to get this done. They log into the wire system, they pull up the email, and then just start typing in all the information. Here's the routing number, here's the account number, all the sort of details you'd need to send a wire. Get to the end of the day, and for context, it was a 6-figure wire. Dollar figures are entered, the send button is pushed, and because the wire system requires dual control, and this is a good thing, staff member gets up from their desk, hey, I need someone else. They're looking around the office, the tellers are all busy, the MSRs are, hang on, there's an open door over here. It just happens to be the CEO's open door. I'll go see if the CEO has a minute to give me a hand. Go over and knock on the door. Hey, I have a wire in the system. It's kind of important. Do you have a minute that you could go into the wire system and approve this for me? CEO doesn't think twice about it. Sure, no problem. Happy to help. Moment or two later, CEO in the wire system, wire goes out the door. Nobody thinks twice about it. The rest of the day continues to proceed as any Tuesday would. You get to the end of the day, everybody wraps up, they balance everything. We go home for the night and have dinner with our families. Next morning, staff members return to the office. Earlier in the day, the same staff member who sent the wire out the previous day gets another email from the CEO asking for another 6 figures to be moved with some bogus excuse as to why it needs to happen 2 days in a row. And now kind of the other shoe drops. The staff member stops for a minute and went, well, this is unusual. I mean, it's odd for the CEO to ask me to send a wire to begin with, but 2 days in a row? And I even talked to the CEO yesterday. They're the one who gave me the approval to send the wire. I'm going to go ask the CEO if this is really them. Walks across the hall, knocks on the door again. Hey, got a weird question for you. And of course, as the story spins out, the CEO's eyes are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is the point where I become involved in the scenario, because the credit union had reached out to corporate, who processes all of their wires for them, and said, hey, we may or may not have sent 6 figures out the door to a wholly unknown party yesterday. Can you recall that wire for us? Well, it's been 24 hours. We'll see if we can get an indemnification signed. We'll contact the receiving financial institution, and, a lot of hand-wringing and hoping begins at that point. And that's that's the sum of the story. So with all the bad news out there, where would you like to begin?
All right. So let's start with signs. Like let's go back to the original email.
Mhm.
What signs should the staff member seen that maybe should have triggered this is unusual or is this real kind of thing? So what are some of the things that they should look for?
So as part of the investigation, we did talk to the credit union's IT team to ask, what kind of controls do you have in place? And one of the big ones that they had in was external email notifications. So for this particular credit union, the word external is appended to every subject line of every email that comes in from the outside world. And additionally, you get like a 2-3 inch thick banner that runs across the top of the message. And it's been a little while, I don't remember what color it is, but it's intended to be an eye-catching color to go, hey, pay attention to me. That says, please proceed with caution. This message comes from the outside world. And in the moment, the staff member was like, I see those things all the time. Every day I get emails from the outside world. That notification has sort of become white noise. And taken out of the moment, when you ask the staff member, hey, did you notice that this came from the outside? No, I didn't. And you know that no email, no legitimate email at least, that comes from a staff member will ever have that banner on it. So it should be the defining line between good and bad in this kind of situation.
Yeah. What about, procedures? I mean, you said, wires have dual authentication. Is there anything that should have been happening there for, there to signal, what is this wire for?
This was as part of, we found out in this investigation, we talked to them about procedures specifically. I said, how does a normal wire get handled? And their first response was, well, a normal wire doesn't come via email. Okay, there's a good starting point.
Flag.
If they don't, then what happened here? And this is kind of the crux of a business email, compromise email. It's someone's pretending to be someone in a position of authority. And the staff member who received it, not only being oblivious to all the external notices, was also, well, the CEO's asking, this must be really important. Who am I to question it? And what came out of this was a change in procedure. Not only was there the acceptance that not every wire will be requested through normal procedures, but there was a kind of an additional piece added to it to say, staff members of any rank and file who've been there for any period of time, if the wire does not come through standard procedure, any deviation, that individual has the authority to go back to whoever the requester is, even if it's the CEO, and say, hey, did you really send me this? And conversely, the senders, often people further up the food chain, have got to be comfortable with their, at least when it comes to wires, their actions being questioned, because it's a check and balance. When you have the anonymity of emails and text messages and phone calls in the middle, where you're not seeing the person and you're outside your normal security procedures, that's when weird things like this tend to creep out. And it took a little while for everybody, the credit union, to get comfortable with it, but procedures were kind of the crux of it. This was an abnormal way to request a wire, but everyone involved assumed, well, CEO's asking, who am I to say otherwise?
Yeah. What other training mechanisms is the credit union now doing after this scenario to kind of make sure it doesn't happen again? Like, I'm sure there's been increased training and things like that. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So the two biggest things, I guess, that came out of this one was this credit union was not, I'm trying to remember, they may or may not have been doing phishing tests. And if they weren't, they started. And if they were, they added to their regiment specific test messages around business email compromise to get staff accustomed to what's it going to look like, what are the telltale signs I need to see, what red flags, like that external email flag we talked about, what red flags should I be looking for to identify good from bad. The other big piece that came out of this, and I find this at a lot of credit unions, the NCUA requires security awareness training, and their stipulations say that you must do it once a year. Well, oftentimes that once a year training becomes, let's come in on what we just had yesterday, President's Day. It's a day off. We'll bring everybody into the office. We'll go over our policies. We'll go over procedures. We'll have some tepid coffee and some stale donuts, and we'll hang out for an hour or two in the morning. But we're often reviewing the same information we reviewed the year before. And although, yes, it covers procedures and policies and how you ought to do something, what it doesn't cover is something like this, a situation that says, well, if we're going to be attacked, then don't think attack like someone sitting with their hood up in the basement type of thing, not that kind of attack. We're talking like an email comes in, a weird phone call, somebody just wanders into the office and starts asking unusual questions. These sorts of things were never discussed with staff members. So when they see them for real the first time, some of them, I have no idea how I'm supposed to respond. What am I supposed to do? Who do I talk to? We encourage them to start building ideas. Like when you would see a goofy email come in, or someone at the credit union, or someone in one of your adjoining credit unions, someone in your chapter runs into one of these situations, share it amongst yourselves. And then once the staff who, in the chapter who go to the meetings know about it, then share it with the rest of the staff in the office so that, hey, if this happens, this is what a BEC email looks like. This is how you identify it. This is who you're supposed to report it to. And ultimately, this is what you're supposed to do with the message, or in the case of the wire, not to do with the message. So a lot of it, the training aspect it seemed simple after the fact, but no one, and to everyone's credit at the credit union, they did what they could with the information they had available, but nobody realized this kind of attack was a thing. Now that they know, and unfortunately, they learned a lesson the hard way. Now that they know, oh, absolutely, they talk about this thing all the time. And others within the chapter, they talk about it. Hey, don't fall prey to this. We were the ones that sent out they own it, but try and learn from someone else's mistakes, not your own in this scenario.
Yeah. Well, business email compromise, it's been on the rise for years, and it's not going away, based on everything that you've shared with me before. And I know you love, to test people with, emails and things like that.
Never do.
Is there a certain cadence, that a credit union should look to do? What would you recommend? I'm thinking you're going to recommend it more frequently, but, like quarterly email testing, monthly email, like, is there kind of a rhyme or reason to how frequently, you do that with your staff? Any guidance there?
The credit unions, we've got a bunch of credit unions that I do phishing tests for them. And I'll say the ones that we're seeing the most success at are running monthly scans. Or I guess scans probably a bad word to use. They're testing their staff monthly, and they test them in a means by which no two staff members in the office get the same message. Because although I want to encourage staff to be able to look at hey, come here and look at this, something doesn't look right. I want to encourage you to interact with the rest of the staff in the office. The more eyes looking at it, the more chance you are to identify it. But I don't want the test to be able to, hey, can you come look at this? And the person who comes and looks at it says, oh, I got that yesterday. That's a test message. Don't worry about it. No one's really learned anything there. They just learned to ask their coworker, and the coworker will give them the correct answer. Well, if your coworker is not available, now what are you going to do? So highly randomized tests.
Okay.
Once a month is a good marker. If you're going more than once a month, my concern would be you may create a scenario where your staff will become gun shy. They'll become terrified of every email that comes in. So you can have too much of a good thing here. I would say once a quarter is probably your minimum. If you're doing less than once a quarter, are you really trying to train them there? You've got there's a balance, and I get it. Not everyone's going to have the budget to do it. But I would say the more often you can do it, the better, up to a month. And then once you're at that monthly line, anything beyond that, maybe you're doing specialized one-off training for staff members who are, I call them frequent flyers, the people who regularly aren't getting past the tests. You might want to test them a little more frequently, but only after you've given them some additional training. Don't just keep throwing test messages at them and don't show them what they're looking for. There's a balance there to be struck as well.
Okay. All right. Well, what else, from this scenario, what else should the credit union have done? Is there any other insight that you can share with us, looking at the scenario that we can share with the people listening today?
You could go to lengths and say things like, don't accept any wire request in an email is automatically off the table. Yes, but in not all scenarios does a hard and fast rule work. I like it when things are black and white because it's very easy to make a decision, but we don't live in a black and white world. That's why policy and procedure exists, because it allows you to work in the gray areas safely. I mean, outside of external email notifications, a good spam filter, if you've got a really, really good appliance that monitors your incoming mail, even looking for things like any faux message you get, anyone that comes in that someone's portraying to be your CEO or CFO or somebody else with alphabet soup behind their name. All of those emails have to come from a made-up domain. They're just spoofing your domain. So strong controls that you can put in on your email server that will tell you things like, if some piece of message is coming in and it's portraying to be my domain, and it's telling me that, how do I want to put this? My name at mycreditunion.com is the incoming message, but I am my name at mycreditunionname.com. You can tell your email server, if you see someone trying to deliver a message from your own domain, just delete it automatically. Don't even deliver it to the inbox. There's also ways that you can set up filters for things that look for email domains that have recently been created, say sub 30 or 60 days. And because in those scenarios, the bad actor is going to spin up a fake domain, send out all this garbage across the internet, and then usually within 30 to 60 days, enough of the appliances that we use from a major corporate perspective have caught on to the domain, so they delete it and start over again. So if you can put a rule in your email system that says, if I get a piece of mail from a domain that's less than 30 days old, just delete it. Because what are the odds it's actually, now I'm not saying that's a permanent rule you should have that will always work. There will be one-offs that cause it to go sideways, but on the whole, what are the odds? Most of your natural person members who are coming to you, they've got they've got a Verizon account, they've got a Google account, they've got let's hope they don't have a Yahoo account, but they've got a major tier 1 carrier who's got their email. So odds are they're not going to have one that's spun up in the last 30 days. There are lots of controls you can put in place, but approach the controls with some caution. In a lot of my presentations, I talk about balance and how your environment's already configured and it works. There might be some foibles here and there, but don't put an overly complicated solution in place as kind of the first go. It makes small, subtle changes to the environment to see if it gets a little bit better and a little bit better, because there is the idea that you can put in a control that is too strong and will cause as much harm to you as it will good. Don't run off the deep end right away. Start with something simple. Couple of just kind of off the top of my head sorts of things. BEC is it's unique to our industry, not to the credit union industry, to financial services, because it's often a financial attack. Somebody wants, they want you to go buy gift cards. They want you to go send them a wire. They want you to, it's monetary. And because our primary business is monetary, that, we're one of the biggest targets. And I think some of the statistics I looked at the other day, better than 70% of BEC email goes to a financial institution. And from 2022 to 2023, there was more than 100% increase in the number of BEC messages being sent out. So if the bad guys are sending more of them, they clearly work. So it's something you and your staff need to know how to identify it and how to stop it and deal with it. Because if we as the financial institution services get to a point where we're stopping enough of them, they'll go find some other way to come after us, because they're not going to spend their time and effort on an attack that doesn't work.
Right. Well, Mike, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time. And here's the thing, Mike, I know you have several other scenarios that you can share. So if you enjoyed this podcast and you want to hear more examples, Mike recently conducted a webinar, Credit Union Security. What would you do? He did that a few weeks ago. A recording of that webinar is available on the Vizo Financial website at www.vfccu.org. All right, so thank you again, Mike. And this episode of Financial Minds Meet the Experts is brought to you by Vizo Financial's partner, DefenseStorm. For banks and credit unions, the financial, operation, and reputational costs of waiting to combat cyber attacks until after they happen are too great. With its dynamic nature, cyber must be treated as a risk management issue, allowing you to stay ahead of the threats. That's what DefenseStorm was built for. And that's why Vizo Financial has teamed up with DefenseStorm, a financial institution cybersecurity solution provider, to help credit unions build those strategies and enforce them through a twofold security and fraud service. For more information, contact your Vizo Financial corporate account manager. As always, thanks for listening and make it a great day.